Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. So what are some of the qualities of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah as a person as well? What are some things that we can take from him? One of them, obviously, when you look at any of these people, the amount of taqwa that they had, the amount of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they had, and the amount of contemplating the Quran and contemplating the Day of Judgment. So you cannot disconnect ilm from ibadah. You cannot disconnect knowledge from worship. And that's why when you study the worship of all four of these men, you find that it's incredible. There are many narrations about it. One of them is that he is amongst the four. Now there are four men in history. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah actually says there's four men in history that are known to have read the Quran in one rak'ah, that have achieved this, that achieved actually reciting the entire Quran in one rak'ah. Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Tamim ibn Aus ad-Dari, the great companion that's from the hadith of Dajjal, seeing the Dajjal, is actually from Tamim ibn Aus ad-Dari radiyallahu anhu. Sa'id ibn Jubair, who we spoke about Sa'id ibn Jubair radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, from Al-Kufa as well. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, four men who were documented in history to have done that. When Imam Abu Hanifa went to Mecca, now we're going to talk about political circumstances that ran Abu Hanifa to Mecca for a few years. When he went to Mecca for a few years, there, subhanAllah, is a beautiful narration that any time you went to the Haram, at any night of the hour, or any hour of the night, you went to the Haram, you went to the Masjid, you saw two people making tawaf, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri and Imam Abu Hanifa. These two great men that are constantly in tawaf, they're constantly worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At any hour of the night, you go there and you see these two people making tawaf. We also see that he made Hajj a total of 55 times. He made Hajj 55 times, meaning he did it annually in essence. And that's not because he was the leader of a group and I could make that claim, that it's because I take groups and things of that sort. No, out of his sacrifice, he made Hajj 55 times. And in the process, he traveled the Muslim world, he experienced different schools of thought, different imams, met different people, and so on and so forth. So that's also part of his influence and knowledge as well, that he was able to interact with people from various regions on the way to Hajj and while he was in Hajj and so on and so forth. And there's, subhanAllah, many different narrations about his qiyam, the way that he would stand up at night. One of his nicknames, because of his qiyam, was that he was a pole. He was this watad that was just constantly standing up, subhanAllah, in qiyam. And you know how these legends start to grow, and obviously in legends, they start to make up stories and things of that sort. He was once walking in the street and there was a kid that saw him and said, "Are you Abu Hanifa?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you the guy that never sleeps at night?" And so Abu Hanifa rahimahullah felt so guilty, felt so bad that he said that about him. And subhanAllah, after that he felt an even greater responsibility to pray more Qiyamul Layl and so on and so forth. There are narrations that he used to keep the same wudu from Isha to Fajr. He would come to Fajr on the same wudu as Isha. Allahu A'lam, some of them seem a bit exaggerated that for 40 years he never made wudu for Fajr. He only made wudu for Isha and kept it until Fajr. But the point is that he was known for his Qiyamul Layl as well. And we find that once he was actually walking and he stepped on the foot of a child. Now we're talking about his fear of the Day of Judgment, al-Yawm al-Akhir. He stepped on the foot of a child. And this child looked at him and said, "Ala takhafu yawm al-qiyamah?" Aren't you afraid of the Day of Judgment? SubhanAllah, can you imagine a child saying that to you? So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, because of that, SubhanAllah, he was so taken aback, he was in so much fear that this child said that to him. Why? That this child said, "Ala takhafu yawm al-qiyamah." Why didn't he just smack him across the face? Like, how dare you say that, right? "Ala takhafu yawm al-qiyamah." Aren't you afraid of the Day of Judgment? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he actually, was really shaken. And when they told him, why did that shake you so much? It's just a little kid. He's just, obviously a really strong kid, But why does it shake you so much? He says that, "I'm afraid that Allah made him say that." Like Allah made him say that to me right now. Like Allah was delivering that message to me. "Ala takhafu yawm al-qiyamah." Aren't you afraid of the Day of Judgment? Also we find, subhanAllah, one thing that also mentions his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment and this is narrated in the Tabaqat of Ibn Sa'd, that he was once praying in the masjid at Salatul Isha, Masjid Kufa. And the Imam read, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. So he read Surah Al-Zalzala. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he started to cry when the Imam read Surah Al-Zalzala. Particularly the last ayah, right? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ يَعْمَلُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى وَمَنْ يَعْمَلُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. That whoever does an atom's worth of good will see it, and whoever does an atom's worth of evil will see it. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, after the salah, he was crying and he was sitting and he started to make dua. And the guard of the masjid, the haris, he needed to lock up and he needed to, not turn off the lights. They put out the candles at that time, and they'd go home. But he didn't want to disturb him. I mean, he's making dua. He didn't want to interrupt his dua. So he waited for a little bit and then he said, you know what? I'll just leave him there. He looks like he's really in deep connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll leave him there. So he said that I came back an hour before Fajr to do the adhan of Qiyamul Layl. They would do the adhan, the two adhans basically. I'd stand up to do the adhan of Qiyamul Layl. And he said he was still in the same spot making dua. And he was crying and he was holding his beard. And while he was holding his beard, he said, يَا مَنْ يَجْزِي بِمِثْقَالِ ذَرَّةِ خَيْرٍ خَيْرًا. O you who rewards an atom's worth of good with good. وَيَا مَنْ يَجْزِي بِمِثْقَالِ ذَرَّةِ شَرٍ شَرًّا. And you who compensates or who rewards an atom's worth of evil, with punishment. He says, أَجْرِ النُّعْمَانَ عَبْدَكَ مِنَ النَّارِ. Protect your servant Nu'man from a nar. وَمَا يُقَرِّبُ مِنْهَا مِنْ سُوءٍ. And that which will bring him closer to it from the evil that he does. وَأَدْخِلْهُ فِي سِعَةِ رَحْمَتِكَ. And enter him into the vastness of your mercy. So look at this beautiful dua. Protect me. And he refers to his name An-Nu'man. And I didn't mention this, by the way. Why is his name Abu Hanifa? There's like all these discussions about Abu Hanifa. Hanifa, the most correct opinion seems that Hanifa meant ink. In Kufic language, it meant ink. So the father of al-habr, basically, the father of, the father of ink and writing and so on and so forth. So he refers to himself with his first name. Ajr al-Nu'man, protect the Nu'man from a nar, from the fire. وَمَا يُقَرِّبُ مِنْهَا مِنْ سُوءٍ. And that which will bring him closer to it. And this mu'adhin, the guard, he sees him making this dua and he's shocked that he's been there the whole time. And so eventually he comes up to him and he tells him, do you know what time it is? Like, do you realize that you didn't go home last night? Do you realize that you didn't, that you didn't sleep? And Abu Hanifa told him, no, what is it? He said, I'm about to make the adhan for Qiyamul Layl, meaning Fajr is in an hour. Fajr is coming up. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, look at what he says. He held the man, he said, and he said to him, don't tell anyone about this. Don't tell, that's the first thing. Not like, yeah, mashallah, it's going to get out now. Everyone's going to know that Abu Hanifa was in Qiyam all night, praying and so on and so forth. And what did the man do? He told everyone. Even though Imam Abu Hanifa told him, don't tell anybody, the guy couldn't help himself. So he told everyone what happened with Abu Hanifa rahimahullah that night. So he had a great fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a great fear of Yawm al-Qiyamah, of the Day of Judgment. Abu Yusuf rahimahullah, he also says that Abu Hanifa was a very dignified man. And out of his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wouldn't ask people for favors because he was afraid that on the Day of Judgment he would owe them. So even asking people for favors, he said, I never saw him ask anyone for a favor. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, maintained his own independence in everything, and he still sought Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy with all of those things. Then you see that, his humility with his family, so the next quality that we'll mention is tawadu', humility. He had great humility. It starts off with his family. His father passed away, Thabit passed away when Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was still not a teenager. Alright, so Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah really had to take over the business and so on and so forth at a young age. And he used to go home and he used to take his mother with him to the masjid. And that's also a beautiful thing that he would go and take his mother and subhanAllah, it's funny because, the idea, or it's ironic rather, the idea that in the Hanafi madhab, women are not allowed in the masjid. When Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to go home every day, and this is narrated in his biographies, and he would take his mother to the masjid every single day, which is a great sign of his humility. And this great mother of his, now remember the story of her, what happened to her. She was a very simple woman, subhanAllah. She was a woman of taqwa, a woman of great worship, but not a woman of great ilm. And one time, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he came to take her to the masjid, and she said, I don't know if I can go to the masjid or not. He said, why? He said, because she said to him, al-istihada, that there was some blood that came on my clothes, and I don't know if I can go pray in the masjid tonight. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, it's okay, don't worry about it. She said, how would you know? Like, it's her son, she's not going to take him seriously, right? Like, oh, really, it's okay, I can go with some blood on my clothes and things of that sort? And he's like, yeah, it's okay, it's fine, it's not menstrual blood, it's not nifas, he's explaining to her the hukum of it, the ruling, it's okay, it's not going to affect your salah or anything like that. She said, I need to go talk to Umar ibn Abi Dhar. Like, I need to go to another person. Now, who is Umar ibn Abi Dhar? Umar ibn Abi Dhar, his nickname was Abu Zur'a. Umar ibn Abi Dhar was, he was a da'iyah, he was a very well-spoken man, a caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Great storyteller, qassas. But when you say qassas, when you say storytellers back then, you're referring to a sect sometime. He wasn't part of the sect, because there were people that would make up stories to get money at that time. They were called qassasun. So he wasn't that person, but he was someone that really had a great appeal with the people. And the funniest thing about it, he's a student of Abu Hanifa. And his mom, Abu Hanifa's mom, is like, I want to go ask him. Okay? And I actually had a really hard time finding details on this man. That shows you that how hard it is, how I don't want to say insignificant, but he really wasn't one of the heavyweights of his time. Even finding his name, because it's always Abu Zur'a, finding Umar ibn Abi Dhar, but he's one of the students of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So can you imagine your mom telling you, I want to go ask him? And Abu Hanifa could have been like, Mom, he's my student, I teach the guy. He doesn't know the ABCs of fiqh, I taught the guy everything that he knows, and so on and so forth. But again, it's the popular speaker versus the credible scholar. It's a great thing when they come together, like the case of Abu Hanifa, but sometimes it's not like that. And it's also very hard to be taken seriously by your household, isn't it? Right? You guys know that when you go home and you start speaking a few words of Arabic, oh, you think because you went to Bayyinah, you're a sheikh now? Right? It's going to happen, right? So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he said, fine. He said, you want to talk to Umar ibn Abi Dhar? So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he took his mom to meet Umar ibn Abi Dhar, and she asks him the question, and Umar ibn Abi Dhar is like, let me go ask someone and I'll get back to you. So he goes to Abu Hanifa and he says, your mom came to me and asked me, if a woman gets some blood on her clothes, can she still go to the masjid and pray? So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, just tell her the answer is yes, but don't tell her you heard it from me. So he goes back to her and he tells her that, I went and raja'at al-mas'ala, and I went and I studied it, and inshallah ta'ala it's okay and you don't have to worry about it. Right? So this is, subhanAllah, the humility of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah with his own family. And particularly, wallahi, as you become bigger in society, it's harder to tolerate people that disrespect you, right? With Imam Abu Hanifa was the opposite. The more popular and famous he became, the more tolerant he became. SubhanAllah, his tolerance showed towards those that disrespected him. And there are so many incidents like this. One time he was sitting in the masjid, and they were going over masail, going over questions, and he said, Akhta al-Hasan. Al-Hasan made a mistake. Who's Al-Hasan? Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, made a mistake. So a man stood up and he said with anger, he said, Yabna Zaniya. Called him the son of an adulteress, right? Yabna Zaniya. Taqulu akhta al-Hasan. You say that Al-Hasan made a mistake? Who do you think you are? Who are you to Al-Hasan? Said, Wallahi, you're not worth the dirt on the bottom of Al-Hasan's feet. Can you imagine in the middle of Masjid Kufa, and he's speaking to the man sitting on the chair in front of all the students, and he says these words, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he puts his head down, and he lets him finish cursing at him and yelling at him. And then the man walks out, and he looks at the students, and the students are waiting for a reaction. And he says, "Akhta al-Hasan wa asabahu ibn Mas'ud." Meaning he didn't even let him complete the sentence. He said to the students, Al-Hasan made a mistake because Ibn Mas'ud said this. Ibn Mas'ud is a companion, right? Radiyallahu anhu, Al-Hasan is a tabi'i. But the man cut off Imam Abu Hanifa in the middle of his sentence because he just said, who do you think you are to say Al-Hasan made a mistake? Abu Hanifa did not address the man, he didn't respond. He just kept going and so on and so forth. And there are numerous narrations of this. One time a man called him a zindiq, like he called him a kafir. He called him a disbeliever. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he simply responded to me, he said, غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَكَ هُوَ يَعْلَمُ مِنِّي خِلَافَ مَا تَقُولُ. May Allah forgive you. Allah knows of me other than what you say. He didn't respond to him. He didn't fight with him. He didn't yell at him. Another man once stood up in his lecture. Yeah, you had angry people back then too that used to interrupt lectures. All right? I just had one this past Friday, but that's another story. All right? But, no, I can't tell you because we're on camera. It's going to go. I'll tell you guys when the cameras are off, all right? I can't. Abu Hanifa time, okay? Let's go to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. One time a man stood up in the middle of his lecture and said, Ittaqillah, fear Allah. Fear Allah. And he said, Jazakallahu khairan, may Allah reward you. He said, Wallahi, we're in need of people like you to remind us of the fear of Allah. Like, I really needed you to tell me Ittaqillah. Thank you so much. You know, I needed someone to say Ittaqillah. And one of the most beautiful things, Sahil ibn Muzahim, radiyallahu anhu, rahimahullah, he says that سمعت أبا حنيفة يقول, I heard Abu Hanifa rahimahullah saying, فبشر عبادي الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zumar, you know, to give the glad tidings to the servants that hear the best of things and they follow the best of it. They hear the words and they follow the best of it. And he said, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to constantly make this dua for the people that didn't like him. So he said he made dua for his teachers, made dua for his students. What was the dua he used to make for the people that didn't like him? He used to say, Allahumma man daqa bina sadra. Oh Allah, whoever has his heart constricted because of us, like whoever's hearts have closed towards us, Allahumma man daqa bina sadrahu, fa inna qulubana qad ittasa'at lahu. Said, make our hearts open up to them. When their hearts close towards us, let our hearts open up to them. SubhanAllah, our hearts are full and welcoming towards them. Meaning, don't let it ever become a grudge. And you know, you go back to the story of the companion of the Prophet ﷺ who used to sleep with no grudge, and that was enough. That was enough for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guarantee him Jannah. Right? That was without him doing anything. Imagine Abu Hanifa has this quality of removing the grudges from his hearts and actually making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that way. Even in that level. Now another thing that's very hard for a scholar not to do is to backbite, especially your opponents. And Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, I told Sufyan al-Thawri, so these are great scholars that are speaking, he said, I've never heard Imam Abu Hanifa, he's telling Sufyan al-Thawri about Abu Hanifa, and he's praising him. He's saying, you know what makes him special? He said, I never heard him backbite, not even his fiercest enemies. Like he never spoke ill about his enemies. He never spoke ill about his opponents. Sufyan, rahimahullah, he responded and he said, he was too smart to threaten all of the good that he's done by his silly backbiting. Like all the hasanat that he's attained, he was too smart to ruin that all with his backbiting. Right? So he was too smart to do that. Then you find, obviously, with his neighbor even. SubhanAllah, you go through the circles. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, didn't have a neighbor that was a abid, a worshipper. He had a neighbor that was a drunk young man. And in Kufa, alcohol, you know, it spread, and you know, again, they were just exposed to a lot of things. So this neighbor of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to constantly get drunk at night. You know, if they had radios back then, you know, whatever it is, or well, they don't even have radios now, do they? Right? If he could blast his music, that's how he was, like really loud, rowdy neighbor that used to get drunk every night. And he was a young man and he owed a lot of people money, so he used to borrow money from people, he never paid them back. People would try to tell him, go do this, go do that, and he kept failing at life, right? Teenager, you know, young man. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah all night long would hear this young man getting drunk and screaming at himself and screaming, you know, incoherent poetry. Right? So he just starts saying words that don't make sense and so on and so forth. But he used to constantly say, Ada'uni, Ada'uni. Ada'uni, you know, what does Ada'uni mean? How would you guys translate that? They misplaced me? That's tarjuma harfiya yani. But it's there. Like they abandoned me. They left me. Who is Ada'uni? Like society. Society doesn't care about me. My family doesn't care about me. And we'll see that his family really doesn't care, but no one cares about me. No one loves me. And he says, وَأَيُّ فَتًى أَضَاعُوا. And what a young man they've abandoned. So he starts to praise himself. لِيَوْمِ كَرِيهَةٍ وَسِدَادِ ثَغْرِ. on a day of harsh, battle and so on and so forth. Like, they could use me in society. Like, I could have done so much, but he blames everyone else. He's not blaming himself. He's saying, Ada'uni, they all let me go. They all abandoned me. And Ada'uni here, he's referring to his, obviously, his work situation, everything he tries to do, he finds that the doors are closing in his face. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah would be listening to him. And subhanAllah, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, when he hears him do that, just knowing the personality of Abu Hanifa, what do you think he did? Probably made dua for him, right? I mean, Imam Abu Hanifa, he wouldn't respond to him, and subhanAllah, there is no narration. When I'm telling you about the dua part, there is no narration. But if a person like Abu Hanifa, who had that level of tolerance and love for the people, standing up and praying at night, and he's hearing this young man say that people have abandoned me, I'm pretty sure that Imam Abu Hanifa would include him in his dua. But he didn't respond to his screaming out loud. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, one night, he realizes that the man's not crying out. So he says, maybe, he drunk himself to sleep tonight. Maybe he's just not, up tonight. Then he noticed the second night. So he went out in the middle of the night and he knocked on his door and the young man didn't answer. The next day, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he went to Fajr. And Imam Zufar, we'll talk about, he said that Abu Hanifa was troubled. Like, he didn't sit for adhkar, he didn't sit for his lectures. He immediately went to the Khalifa, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And he said, where is he? Where's my neighbor? What happened to him? And Abu Ja'far looked into it and he said, well, he was put in prison. He's in prison. Why is he in prison? Because he owed so many people money. In essence, eventually he just got put in prison. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, which prison? So he said, that prison. He said, I want him released. I want him out. How much money does he owe? SubhanAllah, he actually says, how much money does he owe? And one of the narrations mentions 85,000 dirhams. Not a small amount of money. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah went home, he got his money. He said, to Abu Ja'far, send someone with me to that prison so they'll know it's from you, from the Khalifa. Here's his money, I'll pay it off and I want him out. Spends the entire day trying to secure this young man's release. He gets him released and this young man comes out and he sees Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and he's like, why would you do that? Like, why would you even care for someone like me? And subhanAllah, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he laughs and he says, Aturana ada'nak? Did we forget about you? Did we abandon you? And subhanAllah, the most beautiful part of this narration, from an Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam al-Dhahabi says, فَأَصْبَحَ ذَلِكَ الرَّجُلُ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ الصَّفِّ الْأَوَّلِ. That young man became one of the people who always prayed in the first row. And he became a student of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, وَحَسُنَ إِسْلَامُ, and his Islam became good, and his ilm became good, and he became a teacher of fiqh as well. So that's expressing confidence, loving. It's a consistent theme. All of these things, you tie them together, the way he was with the people, the way he was humble with the people. And, even take away from, or go away from just the humility part and the modesty part, just the kindness and the approachability. Zufar says that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he used to make everyone around him feel comfortable. No one felt out of place in his gathering. He said, not the alim or the jahil, the most knowledgeable person or the most ignorant person, the rich person, the poor person, a sinner or a righteous, a fajr or a mu'min, a sinner or a righteous person, they all felt comfortable in his presence. He said he used to laugh a lot and he used to, to care for the people. And he said, I've never seen a man in 20 years, because he sat with him for 20 years, he said, I've never seen a man more willing to listen to people's concerns and advise them. Like Imam Abu Hanifa, despite being as busy as he was, he would take the time, he'd listen to their concerns and he'd advise them. He said he spent his mornings in dhikr and then in knowledge. And then as soon as he would finish, his halaqah, the people would swarm him. And before they could ask him about their problems, he would ask them about theirs. So he'd say, where's the sick person? How's brother so-and-so doing? How is your son? How's your father doing? How's your mother doing? He would ask them, subhanAllah, before they came to him and said, yeah, I just want to follow up with you on. He would ask them, and subhanAllah, he would remember their problems. So he'd say, how is this person doing? How's that person doing? So he asked about them. And if there was a sick person amongst them, he'd go from the masjid to visit that sick person. So he wouldn't just say, give my salam to that person. He'd go visit that sick person, subhanAllah, with the student or whoever came to them. And if someone passed away from his students or from the families of his students, he never missed their janazah. And if anyone was in financial difficulty from his students or the families of his students, he gave them charity. And if anyone from his students wanted to get married, he proposed on their behalf. SubhanAllah. I mean, he cared for the people that were in his circle. He cared for his society. And he said at night, no one came around him. He only reserved that time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So during the day, he's a people's person. He's out there, he's interacting with people. But no one would bother him at night because they knew that that was his time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That was his time for his qiyam. And subhanAllah, there are many narrations. So he said Ash-Sha'bi used to make jokes when he'd answer questions. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he used to laugh sometimes at some of the ridiculous questions he'd get asked, and he'd answer with funny answers as well to put people at ease. So a man came to him and said that, if I'm swimming in the river and I'm taking a bath, do I have to face the Qibla as I'm in the river? And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he started laughing. And he said, if I was you, I'd probably watch your clothes. Right? Don't worry about facing the Qibla, just face your clothes. Right? Because someone might come and take your clothes, So don't worry about facing the Qibla. So people used to ask him ridiculous questions, but they felt comfortable and he'd answer them in a certain way. Now, subhanAllah, what was his brilliance like? What was the aql of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah like? And what was he like as a debater? And this is really powerful because, as we said in Iraq, you really had to be able to hold your own. You're dealing with atheists, you're dealing with Christians, you're dealing with people of philosophy, you're dealing with all the deviant groups. You really have to know your stuff and hold your own. One time he was debating with a Christian, and just listen to what he said to him. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the use of intellect in the Quran in almost every surah. Almost every surah has some form of أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ. Don't they think? Don't they use their intellect? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly praises the use of intellect. He said in almost every surah in the Quran, he said, I've read your entire Bible and I haven't seen a single praise of logic or intellect. Meaning what? He was talking about the difference, subhanAllah, how he views the religion of Islam, that this is an intellectual faith, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invites a person to use their aql, to use their thought. And so he was a brilliant man in debating with people, he was a brilliant man in understanding fiqh, and there are multiple stories of that, and the way that he dealt with people. So there are the debates that he had, you could take it from the debates. One of the most famous debates on atheism is the debate of Abu Hanifa with the atheist, where the man from Ad-Dahriyun, the people who believe that we just die and there's nothing, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was challenged to a debate by that man, and this is a very famous story, and he came late to the debate. The people of Kufa wanted to see him debating. He was obviously a very arrogant and angry atheist guy, so they wanted to see what the debate was going to go like. Abu Hanifa came really, really, really late, and he said, what happened? Did you have to think about your arguments? Did you get scared? Were you thinking about not coming? Then Imam Abu Hanifa gives him that long, elaborate story about as-safina. He says that, I went out and I live across the river and I waited for the wind to blow a certain way and for the wood to be assembled and the nails to come from the bottom of the ocean and for myself to get into the safina, and then I waited for the wind to help me sail across. Right? So he just talks about how I had to wait for this safina being made, this ship being made, or this boat being made. So the man started to laugh and he said, you think, you expect us to believe that? He said, subhanAllah, you people expect me to believe that all of this came from nothing, but you can't believe that a safina came from nothing? So the man was like, he fell for it, and they lost the debate, subhanAllah. And apparently, it's, in one of the narrations, this person became Muslim as well. And even at a very young age, by the way, we said in the souk, these people still used to talk and they used to debate. And in the souk, there was once a man that came, and he was a person from the Romans, and he said, I have questions. Anyone here want to answer me? He didn't go to the masjid, he went to the souk. He said, who was there before God? Man kana qabla Allah, who was there before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said, in what direction does Allah face? And what is Allah doing right now? Three very odd questions. And he kept asking these questions and people didn't know how to answer him. They're like, everyone kind of ignored him. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he got sick of him. And he was working with his father at the time. So he's still a very young man. So this is 11 years old. He's an 11-year-old boy. And he goes up to the guy. And he said, what was your first question? He said, who was there before Allah? He said, do me a favor and count from 10 to 0 backwards. So he counted from 10 to 0 backwards. Or actually 10 to 1. They didn't have 0, right? 10 to 1. So when he got to 1, he said, that's it. He said, can't you go further? He said, no. He said, likewise, we don't go further than Allah the One. Right? So he said, what was your second question? He said, in what direction does Allah face? So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, do you own candles? He said, yeah. He said, when you light up your candles, they light up the entire room, right? He said, yeah. He said, does it stay facing only one direction, or does it just light up the entire room no matter what direction it's facing? He said, no matter what, it lights up the entire room. He says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. We don't ask that question. It doesn't matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the light of the heavens and the earth. Then he said, what was your third question? And as the man was about to ask the third question, Imam Abu Hanifa was kind of like upset with this. He's a kid, right? He's 11 years, but he's like, you know what, I'm sick of this guy. He's yelling and screaming in the marketplace and making a fool of everyone. So he said, you know, people can't hear my answers because I'm really young. So he said, how about we switch spots? Because the man was sitting, you know, he put like a stool or something and started standing on it and speaking. He said, how about we switch spots so people can hear my answer? So the man said, why? He said, because, you know, first, he said, look, 2 questions, no one heard my answer. He said, the third one, I want everyone to hear my answer. So he said, fine. So he got off the stool, Abu Hanifa stood on the stool. And he said, what was your third question? He said, what was the third question? He said that, what is Allah doing right now? What is Allah doing right now? ماذا يفعل الله? What's Allah doing right now? He said, Allah is humiliating a humiliated man, and Allah is honoring me. SubhanAllah, that's like the ultimate, like just, whoof. Now be gone, right? So as a young man, he has these debating skills. So he was able to, and this is Al-Dhahabi rahimahullah says that, you know, people used to excel in debating with certain groups. Like you study a group and you debate them. He said Abu Hanifa could debate with any group and he could win. So the Khawarij of that time, you know, the Khariji movement again was based in Iraq anyway. And they used to curse Uthman and Ali. May Allah be pleased with them. They made takfir. They said Uthman and Ali were disbelievers. May Allah be pleased with them. So one, you know, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he goes to the house of one of the leaders of the Khawarij, which is very bold in and of itself because these people are, you know, very harsh. And he knocked on the door and the man said, what do you want? He said, I'm just coming because I have a young man that wants to propose to your daughter. And the narration says Abu Hanifa was known for that. So it wasn't like far out that Abu Hanifa is coming on behalf of one of his students. He said, why would I want to marry my daughter to one of your students? So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, what if I told you that he is of the best character? That he is the most handsome of my students? That he is the richest of them? That he is the one who has the best nasab, the best lineage? That he prays the entire night and he reads the entire Quran? So the man was like, okay, let me see this man that you're talking about. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, but look, there's one issue that might be a complication. He said, what is it? He said, he's Yahudi, he's a Jew. The guy was like, you want me to marry my daughter to a Jew? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, subhanallah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to you, married his daughter to a Jew. In fact, he married 2 of his daughters to a Jew because they said Uthman was Yahudi. They said Uthman was a Jew. He said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam married 2 of his daughters to a Jew. And you don't want to marry your daughter to a Jew? And the man was like completely, you know, subhanAllah, again, like he makes these people look like fools. Now, the Khawarij were dangerous, right? Because they used to set up checkpoints. And throughout the Ummah, they used to set up these little checkpoints. And, you know, they considered everyone to be disbelievers. So if you got caught up in one of their checkpoints, they would kill you. If you weren't one of them, they'd ask you a few questions. If you didn't answer the way they wanted you to answer, they'd kill you. So one time, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was walking with his students, and they ended up between Kufa and Basra at one of the checkpoints of the Khawarij. So the man comes up to him, and you know he knows Abu Hanifa, he's about to kill him. So Imam Abu Hanifa's students are panicking. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah says, don't worry, I've got this. So the man comes to him, and he recites to him, and this is Surah At-Tawbah, verse 6, he says, وَإِنْ أَحَدٌ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ اسْتَجَارَكَ فَأَجِرْهُ حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. He said that, you know, there's an ayah in the Quran that if any one of the disbelievers seeks your protection, then grant him protection and recite to him the word of Allah, then deliver him to ma'mana, deliver him to his place of safety. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, he recited that ayah when they came. And the man was kind of taken aback. Imam Abu Hanifa said, I'm a kafir, right? I'm a disbeliever, right? He said, yeah. He said, okay, read the Quran to me. So the man read the Quran to them. He escorted them across, delivered them to safety, and let them go. Imam Abu Hanifa said, look, I'm a kafir, right? So you got to give me that right. Allah says, the disbelievers have the right to safety. So you need to deliver me to my place of safety and recite the Quran to me. So subhanAllah, I mean, he had such a brilliant mind in debate. And also, subhanAllah, the way he answered questions, like there were things that he would say, and this is even with the daily situations. A man came to him once and he told him that, I can't find my money, I can't find my gold, I've lost it all. He said, go home and keep praying, keep doing salah until you find it. So he went home and he started to pray. Then he came back to him and he said, Alhamdulillah, I found it all, Jazakallah khair, this is awesome and things of that sort. He said to him, how is it that it worked? What is it that you knew, Ya Imam? He said, well, when you enter into salah, shaitan reminds you of everything of your dunya. So he said that I told you go to your salah because I knew as soon as you went into salah, shaitan's going to come and tell you, okay, here's where it is. Right? There's an incident that took place with Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. This is one of my favorite incidents, and we haven't even started talking about his students. But Abu Yusuf was a beautiful student of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, and Abu Hanifa really raised him, invested in him, and so on and so forth. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And Abu Yusuf got sick, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah thought that he died, and so he praised him. The praise got back to Abu Yusuf, and Abu Yusuf said, well, if Imam Abu Hanifa praised me, I can have my own halaqah now. So he went and he started his own halaqah. So when Abu Hanifa found out, Imam Abu Hanifa sent a man to him to basically confuse him. He said, go to him and ask him, if someone goes to a souk, if he goes to a marketplace, and he takes his garment to a tailor, he finds the tailor and he says, here's my thobe. He said, I want you to tailor it and I want you to give it back to me in 2 days. They agree upon the price and everything. All right? So he pays him the money. Monday, I'll come back Wednesday and I'll get my thobe. He said, if the man decides to steal the thobe, so when he comes back on Wednesday, the tailor says to him, sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. You never gave me a thobe, and he denies everything. Then the man after that goes back to him and says, you know what, no, actually, astaghfirullah, I seek forgiveness from Allah, this is your thobe. All right, you guys follow the question or not? Yeah. All right, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, ask Abu Yusuf, who keeps the money? Does the tailor get the money or does the man get the money? So he said, if Abu Yusuf tells you that the man gets the money back, tell him, akhtat, you're wrong. And if Abu Yusuf tells you that the tailor keeps the money, tell him, akhtat, tell him you're wrong. So the man goes and he asks Abu Yusuf, and Abu Yusuf responds, the man gets the money back. He said, akhtat, you're wrong. Then he said, the tailor keeps it because he knows this is a student. He said, no, you're wrong about that too. So he leaves him. And Abu Yusuf, what does he do? He goes back to Abu Hanifa to ask him the question that he doesn't understand. So subhanAllah, he comes back to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, like I got asked this question that I don't know. And this is their first interaction since he started his halaqah. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he says to him, he said, look, if the man went to him and when he gave him the thobe, the man intended to steal the thobe from the beginning, then there was never a aqd, there was never a contract. Meaning it was aqd batil in the first place, it was falsehood. So the money shouldn't have been, the money doesn't belong to him. He said, but if the man took the thobe and while he was tailoring it, liked it and said, you know what, I'll keep it, then said, no, astaghfirullah, and I'll give it back, then the tailor keeps the money. All right? Do you guys understand the answer? You still don't understand it. All right, I'm not going to go too much into it because of time, but if the tailor intended to steal the thobe from the beginning, then the money was paid on the basis of a contract that was really never there. Okay? But if the tailor really honestly was going to do it, but then the tailor, he had some fitna inside of him and thought about stealing it and then told him, you have no thobe, then went and followed him back and said, no, actually it's yours, then the tailor keeps the money because he still fulfilled the conditions of the contract. So Abu Yusuf said, oh, okay. And Abu Hanifa told him, now sit down and stay in this halaqah. Right? You're not ready yet. You're still not ready. Okay? So it's the brilliance that he had. And now let's talk about these students and what he used to do with his students. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his students describe him as a very loving teacher, the same way that he got, the same love that he got from Ash-Sha'bi and Hammad, that he constantly used to care for their affairs, he used to take care of them, he used to advise them always. And he used to say to them, Istaghfir li asatidatik. Seek forgiveness for your teachers. وَمَنْ أَخَذْتَ مِنْهُمُ الْعِلْمِ. And whoever you took knowledge from, seek forgiveness for them. وَأَكْثِرْ مِنْ زِيَارَةِ الْمَشَايِخِ. And keep visiting the people of knowledge. And he said, and remember your death. أكثر من زيارة القبور, and frequently visit the graves to remind yourself. وأكثر من زيارة الحرمين, and frequently visit the two harams. And he says that, beware of the way that you walk and that you talk. Focus on the way that you walk and talk. Make sure that you display the best of adab. So subhanAllah, his lectures were not just, halal, haram. They really were, he used to give them, mentorship. He used to advise them in that way. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, what's unique about him and his students, that he raised his students to be scholars that could debate with him. Right? He didn't keep them as students. He really raised them to where they were called ashab Abi Hanifa, the companions of Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he said, I have 36 ashab, I have 36 students that I consider on a level of being companions that debate with me and so on and so forth. He said 28 of them are capable of being qula, they're capable of being judges. He says of that 28, 6 of them are mujtahideen, they're scholars in their own right. 6 of them are capable of giving fatwa in their own right. He said 2 of them are capable of even superseding or going past my qawl, my statements in our discussions. And he pointed to Abu Yusuf and Zufar. Abu Yusuf and Zufar. Shaybani comes later. Okay? So Abu Yusuf, Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf and Zufar. Now the point is here that Abu Hanifa used to surround himself with scholars of hadith, surround himself with scholars in different things, and they'd have a debate, and then they'd come to a conclusion collectively as a majlis, as a gathering. He raised Abu Yusuf and Zufar, these 2 scholars, to where they got on the level that they were at their opinion. At times he would say, you know what, you guys are right. And their opinion would actually go past his opinion. And even in the madhab of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, Abu Yusuf's opinions are just as many as Abu Hanifa. The amount of opinions of Abu Yusuf in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa is just as many as his. So let's start off, let's talk about his students. The first one that people are a little, don't know much about, his name is Zufar. Zufar ibn al-Hudayl. Zufar ibn al-Hudayl. And Zufar was considered the highest of Abu Hanifa's students, actually, the most knowledgeable of them. He was the oldest of them, so he was the most senior of them. And when Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah passed away, Zufar actually assumed his seat, but Zufar died right after Abu Hanifa, which is why you don't have much of his legacy in the madhab. Okay, because Zufar didn't live long after Abu Hanifa. He passed away right after Abu Hanifa. Okay? Then you have Abu Yusuf. What's Abu Yusuf's real name? Ya'qub ibn Ibrahim. Now you see why Abu Yusuf. His name was Ya'qub ibn Ibrahim, so his nickname, Abu Hanifa actually called him Abu Yusuf. And that's loving as well that you give your students those kunyas, right? So he called him Abu Yusuf, Ya Aba Yusuf, because his name was Ya'qub, the son of Ibrahim. Abu Yusuf came from a very good household, and he was very intelligent, even as a child. So he used to speak, you know how some kids speak at a much earlier age? So they said Abu Yusuf had complete sentences before the age of 1 year old. I mean, like he was very, very eloquent, well-spoken, even when he was a baby. Like he was already putting sentences together. So everyone knew he was going to be intelligent and brilliant. So Abu Hanifa rahimahullah took him at a very young age, like when he was still a kid. And his mom started to cry because Abu Yusuf loved Abu Hanifa and only wanted to learn Islam now. His mom started to cry. He said, why are you crying? She said, well, I'd hope that this is going to be someone that's going to be a doctor or a politician, or like I had high hopes for him. SubhanAllah, like he's going to study Islam, like really? He's going to become a sheikh? Like I had high hopes for him. I thought he was going to be an engineer. I thought he was going to be really great in something else. So Abu Hanifa, he laughed and he said, listen, don't worry. He said, I promise you that I'm going to raise him to a status that the kings would be feeding him from their own hands. I've got him. I'll take care of him. And Abu Yusuf says that Abu Hanifa funded me and my family for 10 years. He paid for our expenses in the house. He took me, he bought me clothes, he brought me into his halaqah, and he sat me down. And after every halaqah, he'd go over again with him to say, did you understand everything that I said? And I would repeat everything he said in the halaqah. So Abu Hanifa really mentored this kid, subhanAllah, knowing how special he was. And then Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah even sent him to learn from Imam Malik. You see, subhanAllah, how Imam Abu Hanifa is. He wants his students to be broad and develop that broadness. He sent him to learn from Imam Malik, which is why Abu Yusuf sort of merged the school of Abu Hanifa with the school of the people of hadith, right? And brought the hadith component into the Hanafi school of thought to a much greater level, because Abu Hanifa sent him there. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah trained him. He spent on him and so on and so forth. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah loved him like a son. And Abu Yusuf, subhanAllah, became, as Abu Hanifa said, he became Qadi al-Qudha. He became the head of all judges in the Khilafah of Al-Abbasiyah. He became the head of all judges. In the time of Harun al-Rashid, it was Abu Yusuf. And subhanAllah, he was so brilliant and so intelligent, just like Abu Hanifa. One time Harun al-Rashid, you know how people get really elaborate, especially the Arabs with divorcing their wives. They always bring in all these like other components. I don't know how much other cultures do it, but they bring in like these weird oaths and weird sentences. Even till now, by the way. Like I get the weirdest divorce cases. All right, like I told my wife she's divorced 1,000 times if she doesn't take the garbage out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's like, what? I've heard some weird stuff, right? So even in the time of them, and you know, they used to make dumb talaq oaths. Harun al-Rashid once made a really dumb talaq oath on his wife. Once he divorced his wife, and he said to her, unless you can leave my kingdom today, you're divorced. I don't have air travel then. And he felt bad about it after he said it. So he's like, wait a minute, I don't want to divorce my wife. So now he's in a dilemma because he's like, I told my wife that unless you can leave my kingdom, and it's practically impossible for her to get out of the kingdom of Harun al-Rashid in one night. So he called Abu Yusuf and he's like, what do I do? So Abu Yusuf said, you know, repeat the oath to me, I want to hear it again. So Abu Yusuf said, tell her to sleep in the masjid because that's not your kingdom. So subhanAllah, she slept and the kingdom was right across the street from the masjid. So Harun al-Rashid's wife spent the night in the masjid so that the divorce wouldn't count. SubhanAllah. So he was very intelligent. He became a great leader, a great qadi. He wrote many books. Abu Yusuf wrote many books. Only 2 of them survived. All right, 2 of the books of Abu Yusuf survived. Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf survived. One of them is called Al-Rad ala Sayr al-Awza'i. Al-Rad ala Sayr al-Awza'i. Imam al-Awza'i, the Imam from Lebanon, who represented the school of hadith in Sham, was very harsh on Imam Abu Hanifa. Very harsh on Imam Abu Hanifa. So Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf wrote a response to him defending Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Then the second one is something that, you know, in economics still has survived today. He wrote Kitab al-Kharaj, the book of taxation. Harun al-Rashid asked Abu Yusuf, he said, summarize everything, all of the rulings on taxation for me, you know, in Islam. So Abu Yusuf wrote a masterpiece on taxation, which is still used, and by the way, has found itself in our modern day economics. SubhanAllah, you can trace some very specific taxation laws to Abu Yusuf's Kitab al-Kharaj until today. When you study economic theory, till now, there is a connection to Abu Yusuf, even to the non-Muslim society. So Abu Yusuf was the greatest of his students after Az-Zufar. You know, he was the one that really carried the madhab in that time. And then you have Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, and this is the last student we'll talk about. Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani. And Imam al-Shaybani rahimahullah, and these are, Abu Yusuf and al-Shaybani are as-Sahibain or al-Shaykhain. They're called in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa the 2 scholars, the 2 great sheikhs, the 2 companions. Al-Shaybani was only 18 when Abu Hanifa died. But he studied with him, you know, just like Abu Yusuf, he was taken in at a young age and mentored and so on and so forth. And when Abu Hanifa passed away, he dedicated himself to Abu Yusuf as well. Okay? This is the man who spread the Hanafi madhab through the world, Al-Shaybani. Because he was young when Abu Hanifa passed away, he lived a long life. He interacted with many, many, many different scholars of hadith as well, which we're gonna show the whole diagram inshallah, which shows you all the interactions between the madhab. He interacted with all of them. He spread the madhab through the entire, Muslim world, and he wrote the most books in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Interestingly enough, when Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah first saw him as a kid, he came to Abu Hanifa's majlis, and Abu Hanifa told him, "Are you a hafidh of Quran yet?" He said, "No." He said, "Go memorize the Quran and come back." So he was initially turned away to go memorize the Quran, to go do hifth, and then he came back, and he became one of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's greatest students. And he learned from Imam Malik for 3 years. He taught Ash-Shafi'i for a few years. So the whole madhab is connected as well through Ash-Shaybani. And he wrote many of the books. He wrote a total of 6 books himself in the Hanafi fiqh. All of these books together, Al-Mabsut, Al-Ziyadat, Al-Jami' Al-Saghir, Al-Siyar Al-Saghir, Al-Jami' Al-Kabir, Al-Siyar Al-Kabir, I just went through them quickly. They all compromise, they're what's called Al-Kafi in the Hanafi madhab. The encyclopedia of the Hanafi madhab are basically his 6 books. These are the most These books have the most authority in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And then there are two other things which are just some of his fatwas. And he named them Al-Haruniyat. Who can figure out why it would be called Haruniyat? The Khalifa Harun al-Rashid. So basically fatwas that he gave in the time of Harun al-Rashid. And then he had Riqiyat. Al-Riqiyat. When he moved to the city of Al-Riqqa, then he had his fatwa there. And the ulama were very, very, very strict on making sure which fatwas were old and which ones were new and how their perspectives changed with context, which is very important here as well. So you have those students of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. What did his peers say about him? Ash-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala said, we are all iyal, we are kulluna iyal. We are all children, dependent little children on Imam Abu Hanifa when it comes to fiqh. All of us. And you will find that in fact, let me just go ahead and show you guys right now on the screen just what, Imam al-Shafi'i was not playing when he said that we are all iyal on Abu Hanifa when it comes to fiqh. If you look here, this is Kufa. I'm going to talk about the influence on Hanafi fiqh, but look down at Imam Abu Hanifa right there, and we'll go past the upper chains. There's Imam Abu Hanifa. There are his students, the three students we just mentioned. Then look how they connect, and may Allah reward Sister Nai for spending all the time working on this. MashaAllah, we got it done. If you go to Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, he becomes a student of Imam Malik, a teacher of Imam al-Shafi'i, who in turn becomes a teacher of Imam Ahmad. And then you go to Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, he becomes the first teacher of Imam Ahmad. So literally every one of the schools of fiqh was influenced by Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. It all comes, at the end of the day, the touch of Imam Abu Hanifa's fiqh came into all of the madhahib after him, into the other three madhabs very, very, very strongly. So Shafi'i said, literally, we're like children when it comes to fiqh with Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. We were dependent upon him. And Imam Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah, who had a madhab for over 100 years, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, in front of Imam Abu Hanifa were like small birds in front of a falcon. And he said when Abu Hanifa used to visit Sufyan al-Thawri, he used to stand up for him. And he wouldn't stand up for anyone other than him. And he said, this man holds a rank higher than my peers. And he said, if I didn't stand up for his ilm, for his knowledge, I would stand up for his age. He was older than him. And he said, if I didn't stand up for his age, I would stand up for his taqwa. I would stand up for his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if it wasn't for his taqwa, then for his fiqh. SubhanAllah. So there's so many reasons for me to stand up for him. And we find Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, we said many problems were solved when Imam Abu Hanifa met Imam Malik. Before that, it was standoffish between Ahlul Hadith and Ahlul Ra'i. When Imam Malik met Abu Hanifa, they spent a lot of time together. A lot of time together. And they sat together, and subhanAllah, it's a private room, right? There are no students allowed. They talk. Both of them, when they would come out of the room after talking to each other, would be covered in sweat. They made each other sweat, because they were both at that level, right? Where they'd never been challenged by anyone to that level. So they'd make each other sweat. They'd come off with beads of sweat on their face and wipe the sweat off of their face after sitting with one another. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would say that this man is from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. This man took from the inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ. He'd praise Imam Malik. And Imam Malik rahimahullah said, this man is on the straight path. He's on Sirat al-Mustaqim. So they'd praise each other. And Imam Malik once told the Shafi'i, he said, Abu Hanifa is so brilliant that he could convince you that this pole is gold. You know, subhanAllah, his skills in speaking and in debating are so much that he could convince you that this pole is gold. So they spent a lot of time together, and they worked out their issues, if you will, and there was a respect, and that's when Abu Hanifa sent his students to study with Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala while he was still alive and after his death. I mean, it's only natural that his two greatest students, Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf and Al-Shaybani, both went to Imam Malik after that. SubhanAllah, there was a natural transition there. There are some other statements. Abu Muawiyah al-Darir, he said loving Abu Hanifa is part of loving the Sunnah. Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah ta'ala, who had a very, very important role in spreading the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, the great scholar, the great Zahid, he was a Hanafi himself. And when he heard of the criticisms of Imam al-Awza'i, he went to al-Awza'i and he spoke to him, and he compiled everything. He wrote for him everything that he heard from Abu Hanifa, and he called it An-Nu'man. He just wrote a book, he titled it An-Nu'man. We don't have that book now, but he just compiled everything that he heard from Abu Hanifa. He handed it to Al-Awza'i, and he said, read this and then tell me if you'll still criticize him after this. So Al-Awza'i, for 3 days, he read this and he only took breaks for Fard Salah. He just went through it and he contemplated and he pondered. And then Al-Awza'i came to Abdullah al-Mubarak rahimahullah, and he says, هَذَا نَبِيلٌ مِنَ الْأَشْيَاخِ. This man is a master of the scholars. And Ibn al-Mubarak said, this is the same man you used to tell me not to go see. This is the same man you used to tell me. So again, a lot of these misunderstandings got worked out. Now we're going to talk about the not so convenient part, which is the politics of it. I don't know if you guys have it in you right now. Do you guys have it in you to talk politics right now? We'll do it anyway, right? Actually, the computer disagrees. This is another one of those awesome diagrams that was made. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward Sister Nai. This took a long time, hours and hours and hours to put this all together. To talk about the political situation now. Now, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, out of the 4 Imams, he really starts, he's most like Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, in that they really could not stay out of politics. They really got involved in politics, in the politics of their time. And that shows you that even them, they had their characteristics, they had their differences as to how to approach the political situation. We talked about the situation in Kufa with Bani Umayyah. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah supported one of the uprisings against Bani Umayyah. All right? And that uprising was by the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, Zaynul Abidin. All right? I'm sorry, the great-great-grandson, Zayd ibn Zayn al-Abidin. So his name is Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. Zayd ibn Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. So this is the great-grandson, the great-great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. He's the son of the man who's known as Zaynul Abidin, the beauty of the worshippers, a great scholar, a great tabi'i that was well known to the people. Zayd ibn Ali was Imam Abu Hanifa's teacher for 2 years. And Zayd ibn Ali, he started a revolt against Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. So Hisham ibn Abdul Malik is 2 Khalifas, if you see here, after Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. So that's the year 105 after Hijrah. Now obviously everyone loved Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he never met him, but he loved him, he heard of him. And it went downhill with Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. And Zayd ibn Ali, he started that revolt against against Hisham. And this revolt was in the year of 121. What that tells you, the year 121, Hisham took the Khilaf at the year 105. Meaning they tried, they gave it a shot, they tried to get along with him, it just wasn't working. So finally Zayd started his revolt in the year 121. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah supported this revolt. In fact, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah likened it to the Battle of Badr. He said, I consider Zayd's going out like the Battle of Badr. SubhanAllah. So the next accusation that came, some accused him of being Shi'i, some accused him of being Khariji, so on and so forth. He said, I consider Zayd's rebelling, his revolt, like the Battle of Badr. And he was asked, how come you don't go fight with him? Because Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was supporting it. Again, the scholars had to be very careful how they worded their statements, their letters, how they gave hints to their students, all right, about how they felt about these issues. He said, why don't, لِمَا تَخَلَّيْتَ عَنْهُ? Why don't you go fight with him? So he said, قَالَ حَبَسَنِي عَنْهُ وَدَائِعُ النَّاسِ. He said, what's holding me back is the amana to the people, the trust to the people. He says, عَرَضْتُهَا عَلَى ابْنِ أَبِي لَيْلَى فَلَمْ يُقْبَلْ. I gave it, or I entrusted Ibn Abi Layla, I offered it to him to take over for me, and he didn't accept that. He says, فَخِفْتُ أَنْ أَمُوتَ مَجْهَلًا. I was afraid that I die, and it's just going to be death for me, and this, everything that I've worked to achieve here is going to be broken down. He said, وَلَوْ عَلِمْتُ أَنَّ النَّاسَ لَا يَخْذُلُونَهُ كَمَا خَذَلُوا أَبَاهُ. He said, had I known that the people were not going to betray him the way they betrayed his father and his grandfather, meaning I know the people are not going to last with him, they're going to betray him. He says, لَجَاهَدْتُ مَعَهُ. I would go out and I would fight with him. He says, لِأَنَّهُ إِمَامٌ حَقٍّ. He said, because this man is an imam of truth. وَلَكِنْ أُعِينُهُ بِمَالِي. He said, I give him my money. I support him financially. He says, فَبَعَثْتُ إِلَيْهِ بِعَشْرَةِ آلَافِ دِرْهَمْ. I sent him 10,000 dirhams. And I said to the messenger that I sent to him, أنصت عذري له. Give my apologies to him that I'm not out there fighting with him. So Abu Hanifa took a very explicit position. Most of the Imams took very implicit positions. He took a very explicit position on the rebellion of Zayd ibn Ali. And of course, Ja'far al-Sadiq, who was also part of this, again, was a companion of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, and a teacher, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. All four Imams narrated from him. He's a great scholar, and he also supported this rebellion against Bani Umayyah. Now, Zayd ibn Ali was killed in the year 132, all right, by Marwan. All right, so he was killed by Marwan in the year 132, okay? And his son Yahya, the son of Zayd, started a revolt of his own, and he was killed as well, all right? Then Yahya's son Abdullah started a revolt, and he was killed as well. So this wasn't working for them at all. The rebellion of Zayd ibn Ali, and of at that time who were called Al-Alawiyin, the children of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it wasn't working, and they were constantly being killed by the people. All of this affected Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, because the Umayyas now were hearing that Imam Abu Hanifa is against them. Okay? Banu Abbas, now the Abbasids rose up, Al-Abbasiyah, they rose up, and you have the Khawarij, they rose up as well. So you have these other revolts that have been created, because once one revolution comes, what happens? A whole bunch of them come, which is why, Ahl Sunnah typically, again, they weren't apolitical. I think that's a lie. I think it's not true. But they were very careful when it came to rebelling against the ruler, if it's going to cause more harm than good, if it's just going to lead to chaos. So you had these other two revolts that grew. All right. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, when the word came that he supported Zayd ibn Ali at that time, Bani Umayyah, they sent someone to torture him. So he was tortured by a man by the name of Umar ibn Hubayrah. And this was in the Umayyi Khilafah, and this is the first time we see here now that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would be beaten and imprisoned. That's right after the revolt of Zayd ibn Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he wasn't attacked right away. Basically, Ibn Hubayrah, who was the wali, he was the governor of Iraq for the Umayyads, he came to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and he said, I want to appoint you as the treasurer. I want to make you Khazin of Baytul Mal. Why did he want to do that? Because he wants to show the people that he's with us now. Right? All that stuff that he said, disregard it, he's really part of us. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah didn't accept. He said, fine, then I want to make you a judge. He said, no. And then he said, even if you told me to hold the doors of Masjid Wasit for you, I wouldn't agree to do it. How do you expect me to agree to your chopping heads and to your killing innocent people? He said, Wallahi lam uqbal. He said, Wallahi, I will never accept this. SubhanAllah, look at the strength. And what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Inna a'zam al-jihad kalimatu haqq 'inda sultan jar. Imam Abu Hanifa spoke a word of truth in the face of this oppressor. He said, it's not going to happen. So this man, after that, he took him, Ibn Hubayrah, and he imprisoned him, and he was beaten so severely that they thought they killed him. SubhanAllah, can you imagine? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, this great man, was beaten so severely. Again, we like to romanticize the past. Bukhari, we saw what happened with him. Fitan happened, trials happened to the greatest of people. He was beaten almost to a point of death. Then afterwards they let him go, and Ibn Hubayrah said, I'm going to come ask you the same question in a week. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he fled to Mecca. Okay? So he goes to Mecca at this time, and he stayed in Mecca for 6 or 7 years. That's where most of the interactions happen with Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala and the people of Hadith and so on and so forth at that time, as he stays in Mecca. And then at the same time, now the Abbasids, Ad-Dawla al-Abbasiyya, they revolt against the Umayyas successfully. And the remnants of the children of Ali radiallahu anhu supported Ad-Dawla al-Abbasiyya. They supported the Abbasids in their revolt against the Umayyas. And so finally, in the year 132 after Hijrah, the Abbasis actually overthrew the Umayyas. They ran them out of Iraq, they ran them out of Al-Hijaz, so they ran them out of all of these places. They basically cornered them into some strongholds in Asham, in Damascus, and in Andalus. They ran them to these places. They took over the majority of the Muslim world in that regard. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, again, he supported that against them at that time. When he heard that the Abbasis were successful in overthrowing the Umayyas, he came back to Iraq. And the man that assumed the Abbasi rule, the first Khalifa of the Abbasis, is a man by the name of Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah. Anyone know what as-Saffah means in the Arabic language? Anyone knows? Saffah means bloodthirsty. Why was he Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah? Because he was, the amount of hatred that he had for the Umayyas led him to literally massacre some of them. Massacre their remnants. The man just, he really, really lost it with them. In fact, subhanAllah, there are narrations of him even mutilating corpses from the Umayyas. He hated them. And they actually called him as-Saffah, a bloodthirsty man. Now, at this time, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he doesn't know much about him. He comes back to Al-Kufa, and the nickname as-Saffah comes after that. Abu al-Abbas wanted to get everyone together with him for the first part, so he wanted to portray himself as a peacemaker, as someone who's going to restore the ummah to glory. So he comes to Al-Kufa, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah arrives in Kufa at the same time. And Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah, he gathers the scholars of Kufa, and he says to the scholars of Kufa that, Ya ma'shar al-ulama, O group of honorable scholars, antum fi amana, you are now in trust, you're now able to speak. Inna hadha al-amra qad afda li ahli bayti nabiyikum, that now everything has gone back to the honor of Ahl al-Bayt, to the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Basically gives them this long elaborate speech saying, in my khilafah you're going to be safe now, you can speak, and so on and so forth. So the ulama, they didn't know how to answer. So who did they all look to? All of the scholars of Iraq, they got quiet and they looked at Abu Hanifa, waiting for Abu Hanifa rahimahullah to respond. And he said, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala says, Alhamdulillah alladhi balagha al-haqqa min qaribatin min nabiyhi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he's actually praising now that the overthrow has taken place of the Umayyas. Again, he's the most political of them all. So Alhamdulillah alladhi balagha al-haqqa min qaribatin min nabiyhi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, all praises be to Allah who allowed the truth to rise from the children, from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, وَأَمَاطَ عَنَّا جَوْرَ الظُّلْمَ, and took away from us the injustice of the oppression that we were suffering. He said, we will be in your support so long as you support the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ, and you don't take the rights of people. And Abu Hanifa says, all of this is fine, you can say all these great things, but at the end of the day, we're going to watch your actions. As of right now, alhamdulillah, we're happy, we're pleased that, the dhulm is taking place. This dark cloud that was over us has been removed. It's gone now. And we will support you so long as you support the truth. Now, unfortunately, what ended up happening is that after the Abbasis originally had the support, actually they had the support of the Persians as well, by the way, as a whole, because the Umayyas were considered Arab nationalists. They were considered racist. So the Persians supported them. The family of the Prophet ﷺ, the Alawiyin of that time, the family of Ali, they supported the Abbasis. Unfortunately, it turned around, and the Abbasis now started to oppress the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So they turned their backs on Ahl al-Bayt, they turned their backs on the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And this was not Abu al-Abbas as-Saffah. It's not necessarily for him, for the most part. It's said that this is not really much of him at all. In fact, they say that he used to honor the family of the Prophet ﷺ. He really had no issues with the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So in his time period, Abu Hanifa said nothing about him. Okay? It's when the next man comes, whose name is Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And al-Mansur, as-Saffah ruled, he was the Khalifa for 4 years. Okay? And then comes Al-Mansur. Al-Mansur takes over. Now Al-Mansur, what makes him perplexing, and subhanAllah, the scholars say this is a sign that having knowledge is not enough. Al-Mansur was the most knowledgeable of them. He had a lot of ilm, as far as the leaders and things of that sort. He was someone that had actually had some experience studying. But Al-Mansur was very paranoid. So without anyone provoking him, he starts to send his spies to this sounds very much so like the Muslim world in our days. He starts to send his spies to the different halaqas to see, is anyone questioning my rule? So he goes back to that mentality of shutting down anyone that even somewhat criticizes his rule. He's very paranoid about it. And that leads him to the oppression of Ahl al-Bayt. It leads him to the oppression of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because he said, look, they had a revolt of their own, and if we let them gather themselves again, they're going to go and revolt against us now. They're not going to be satisfied with us being in power. So he's a very paranoid individual, a very paranoid man. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he didn't think much of him at all. From the very beginning, he didn't like Abu Ja'far. All right? But he kept his mouth shut until the oppression started. In fact, subhanAllah, there's an incident that took place where Abu Ja'far, and this just shows you the integrity of Abu Hanifa. Remember the financial dependence thing? Like, I don't want anyone to say that I'm on their leash and I'll say what they want. Abu Ja'far had a fight with his wife. He had an argument with his wife. And he said, fine, let's bring Abu Hanifa to judge between us. The fight was about, he kept getting married. So he kept marrying more than one and divorcing and so on and so forth. So he kept getting married. So he asked Abu Hanifa, he says, how much, in front of his wife, he says, how many wives did Allah allow us to have? So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said 4. So he looked at her and he said, see? And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدٌ. If you're afraid that you will not be able to show justice, then you can only marry one. So his wife said, see? So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he got up and he left, and Abu Ja'far was infuriated with him. Now the wife of Abu Ja'far sent him camels and gifts and all kinds of things, right? And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he sent it all back. Integrity is very important, subhanAllah. He sent it all back, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he said that, wallahi, I did not say anything that I said out of gaining your approval, but I only said it because I thought that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be pleased with. Meaning, I didn't do this for that. I'm not going to take your bribe or take your gift because I ruled in your favor here. All right? Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he also gave a hint in one of his lectures when he was asked about Abu Ja'far, when Abu Ja'far was starting to show signs of paranoia and things of that sort. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, be with the ruler like you are with fire. Benefit from it, but keep your distance. Meaning it's fine, keep your distance from him. Don't go hardcore into him and so on and so forth. And most of the people of Iraq, look, they went with the flow, right? If there was, as far as the scholars were concerned, if it was the Umayyas, okay, it's the Umayyas. If it's the Abbasis, Abu Hanifa was not like that. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala had his issues. So finally, what ends up happening is that Abu Ja'far starts, what he does against Ahl al-Bayt, he starts to pursue the family of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, some of them the teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. And one of them was one of Imam Abu Hanifa's best teachers. His name was Abdullah ibn al-Hasan al-Muthanna. Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, that's the name that actually, those of you that are taking notes, I think you should write down. Abdullah ibn al-Hasan al-Muthanna. Abdullah ibn al-Hasan al-Muthanna is one of the contemporaries of Sufyan al-Thawri, Imam Malik al-Awza'i. He's a great scholar of hadith. Great scholar of hadith. And he's from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Ja'far, when he came to power, he feared him because of his popularity. He feared him because of his scholarship. And also, his sons, Abdullah ibn al-Hasan had 2 sons named Muhammad and Ibrahim. So Muhammad ibn al-Muthanna and Ibrahim al-Muthanna, his 2 sons were very, very much so part of the overthrow of the Umayyas. So Abu Ja'far said, let me go after them before they go after me. So subhanAllah, he was saying, let me go ahead and attack them before they attack me. Muhammad and Ibrahim, the sons of Abdullah ibn al-Hasan al-Muthanna, they heard about what was happening, so they went into hiding. So they went into, so this is the nasty part that's taking place now, really in the Ummah. They went into hiding, they went to Yemen, they even went to India, right, to hide from Abu Ja'far because they were afraid of Abu Ja'far catching them. Instead, Abu Ja'far, unfortunately, he goes to Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, and this is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. According to Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, this is the one that really set Abu Hanifa off with Abu Ja'far. That he went to Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, great old alim, a great old scholar, and he said to him, where are your sons? And he said, I don't know. He said, where are they? He said, I don't know. And then he said, Wallahi, even if I knew where they were, even if they were right under my feet, I would not give them to you. You think I'm going to hand over my sons to you? So then Abu Ja'far tortured Abdullah ibn al-Hasan, put him in jail, beat him, paraded him around. And then you have the next revolt, which even Imam Malik supported, which is the revolt of Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyya, which is Muhammad ibn Abdullah here. And that's in the year 145 after Hijrah. He starts his revolt now, and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he supported this, and subhanAllah, in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, in Ibn Kathir's narration of this, he actually makes dua against Abu Ja'far twice. It's a very powerful and emotionally worded, subhanAllah, portion. It's huge. And because Abu Ja'far apparently dragged some of the family of the Prophet ﷺ in chains, he tortured Abdullah ibn Hasan, he did awful things to them. And Imam ibn Kathir rahimahullah makes dua against him in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. And Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyya, he starts his revolt and so on and so forth, his uprising. Now, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah passes away in the year 158 after Hijrah. So the time of the revolt of Imam Abu Hanifa, the last 5 years are very politically turbulent for Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, when he would be asked in his classes about Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyah, because this was taking place now in different places of the world. Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyah was actually gathering his revolt in al-Madinah. He was starting in Medina. The Khilafah was moved to where now? So I want you guys to know, we said the Khilafah was first in Medina, then it went to Kufa, then it went to Ash-Sham. The Abbasis established the Khilafah in Baghdad. All right? So Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyah started in Medina. And he rallied up in Medina and he did what he did in Medina. And Abu Hanifa was being asked about it. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would praise him and he would speak well of him. And he would say that he would never, مَا قَامَ عَلَى بَاطِل. This is not a person that would stand up for anything that is false. So when Abu Ja'far heard that, Abu Ja'far called Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and he tried to do the same thing that Ibn Hubayra did. He said to him, I want you to be a qadi. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said no. He said, why not? Abu Hanifa said, I'm not qualified. He said, Anta kadhab, you're a liar. He said, exactly, I'm a kadhab. Why do you want me to be a qadi? SubhanAllah. He's like, this is Abu Hanifa's way of responding. He's like, okay, if I'm a kadhab, why are you trying to make me? You're a qadi. Okay, so then Abu Ja'far, unfortunately, he imprisoned Abu Hanifa, and this was the second imprisonment of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was tortured in prison. And the difference in narration is only whether he passed away in prison or whether he passed away when they let him out. Like whether after they had tortured him to that extent, they let him out and he died out there. SubhanAllah, just think about that. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, the great man, everything we talked about, contributed to this ummah, this is how he was treated. And SubhanAllah, his wasiyah, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his wasiyah, and this is really, really, really powerful. The only wasiyah that he left, he said, don't bury me in a place that was taken by dhulm, in a place that was occupied unjustly, even if it's just an accusation, meaning I don't even want there to be a shubha here, even a disagreement. Now, is it from a fiqhi perspective, if you're buried in an occupied territory, is there any itham on you, any sin on you? No. But Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, I don't want to be buried in a place that was taken unjustly, even if it's just an accusation. And he said don't bury me in a place that was ever purchased or sold with riba. SubhanAllah, nothing that had to do with interest, nothing that had to do with dhulm. And he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is now in the year 150 after Hijrah. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, the janazas on Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, they had 6 janazas, each one was over 50,000 people. Meaning the amount of people that came to pray janazah on Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala were over 50,000 per janazah, over 6 separate janazas. So, the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Now, the point here that I want to show you, by the way, is how everything connects back to the Prophet ﷺ. This is the Prophet ﷺ at the top. I wanted to show you guys the effect of the Sahaba on the fiqh that took place in the various parts of the Muslim world. And this took a very long time to make. Alhamdulillah, though, it's very useful for you, inshallah, connecting the dots. All right, the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. The thing about Imam Abu Hanifa is that Imam Abu Hanifa, out of the 4 Imams, is the only one that didn't write a work. There are some things that have been attributed to him, but there is no undisputed text from Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So he's never been able, he never had the opportunity to defend his madhab, to defend his approach, and so on and so forth. It's really his students. Whereas the other schools of thought, they have writings from the Imams themselves. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is unique in that regard. Also, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his madhab in and of itself, the way he approached fiqh rahimahullah ta'ala, was that he invited people to contribute at his level. So the fiqh of Abu Yusuf could very well be the Hanafi fiqh, could be the mu'tamid, it could be the trustworthy position, the strongest position in his madhab, because he was so strong on letting people contribute and letting people derive their conclusions and things of that sort. What were his usul? What were his principles? Because a madhab at the end of the day, these schools of thought, are a set of principles. They're not a set of opinions. And that's one of the greatest misconceptions that people have about madhahib, is that they're sets of opinions. Okay? If you do this, you're being Hanafi. If you do this, you're being Hanbali. Right? If you follow local moon sighting, you're Hanafi. Even though Imam Abu Hanifa was a global moon sign, but that's another discussion altogether. But the point is that if you follow this, you're this. And you take one understanding of the Hanafi madhab, all right, from one group of scholars in one particular context, and that's the Hanafi madhab. And that's very, very, very incorrect. A Hanafi from Egypt, from Al-Azhar, looks very different from a Hanafi from Deoband. Very different. They have their different approaches, they use the usul and they derive opinions and so on and so forth, but it's a set of principles. So his usul, the first one of his usul, is the Quran. The first main source is Al-Quran. How does Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah approach the Quran though? All of them would say the Quran. Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would look at the mutlaq, the absolute ayah, as opposed to the muqayyad, the specific case that it was referred to. What that means is he was against a takhsis, he was against specifying incidents and making it the general rule, making it the injunction for everyone else. All right? So he will take, and I'm going to give you guys an example because I want you guys to actually see how he derives some of his opinions in that regard. Okay? He would rather take a general rule from one ayah in regards to an issue rather than a specific incident that was revealed to people and then make it, and make the ummah bound by it. So for example, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, one of the opinions that no one else agreed with him on, in his madhab, it's allowed for non-Muslims to enter al-Masjid al-Haram. So Mecca, Masjid al-Haram, non-Muslims can go there as well. Why? Because he said that the specific ayah referred to where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to them, إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ, that they are spiritually impure and do not let them come in and so on and so forth. He said that that's when they were still worshipping their idols and so on and so forth. He said as long as someone comes to the haram and they're not worshipping the idols and they're not bringing that stuff with them, then it's permissible for them. So that was actually his opinion. So he'd rather take the umum, he'd rather take the am, the general rule, than the takhsis of a situation and say that's referring to something very specific there. Okay? Then you have the sunnah. The second one is the sunnah. As we said, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, Ahlul Ra'i did believe in hadith. They didn't reject a hadith. However, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala lived in a context where a hadith were being fabricated due to the politically turbulent times, due to the mixing of philosophies and so on and so forth. So he would reject a hadith that he wasn't convinced was authentic. So his conditions were more strict. Not because he wasn't the scholar to scrutinize chains of hadith. That's not Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's thing. But Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala would not use a hadith that he was not convinced by. It has to be undisputedly authentic. It is absolutely incorrect to say that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah rejected authentic hadith and used his reasoning instead. That's one of the most simplistic and naive statements that or clearly someone that has never studied fiqh would say that. All right. Rather, he was very strict in what ahadith he would use. And realize here, when it comes to ahadith, they had the fabricated ahadith, then you have chains of ahadith that might have become weaker in later points of history. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah actually wrote a book called Raf'ul Malam an al-A'immat al-A'lam. Raf'ul Malam an al-A'immat al-A'lam. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah wrote it, right? So shatter your misconceptions right away, which means lifting the blame off of the great scholars, the great imams. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentions that, sometimes a hadith became weaker later on. The sanad became weak later on in the hadith. So for example, when it was at the time of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, it might have been a sahih hadith. Might have been authentic, but then a later chain in the link was weak. So the narrator that came after that narrator that lived in his time was the weak chain that allowed the hadith to be classed as da'if or inconclusive. So it's not appropriate to just say that he rejected a hadith. He did go into extensions in ijtihad and in qiyas, the hypotheticals, which is something that Imam Malik criticized very heavily, very harshly. Okay? What if this happens? What if that happens? Going on to extensions and using a hadith and so on and so forth to try to cover as many situations that haven't happened as well. And obviously some people took it a little bit too far. Now, is Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah a trustworthy person? There's also the debate about what his role is in hadith. And look, you find early scholars, look, no one was an angel here. People would debate these things, all right? So, Al-Qadi Ayyad, the great Maliki scholar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he criticized Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah in hadith. He said that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah wasn't as knowledgeable in hadith as the others. He didn't have the knowledge of hadith that the others had. He was a great scholar in fiqh, but he wasn't a great scholar in hadith. Yahya bin Ma'in, who was one of the great scholars of hadith, Yahya bin Ma'in said, not only is he thiqah, he's thiqah. He's beyond trustworthy in hadith, and Yahya bin Ma'in is a great hadith scholar. And Al-Dhahabi says that Yahya bin Ma'in was Hanafi muta'assib, like he was a fanatic Hanafi, and he was a scholar of hadith, right? There are differences of opinions here about, what was his status in hadith. No one would dare question his trustworthiness or question his knowledge. It's about what he chose to accept and reject and use reasoning instead. And even in his time, that was a way to fabricate something against him, was to say that he rejected hadith. Muhammad al-Baqir, the great grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, who was a teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, he came to him, and the first time he met him, he said to him, "You're the one that rejects the statements of my grandfather in favor of your reasoning." Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said, "Allahu Akbar, who does that?" And he sat him down and they went through some masail and things of that sort. And he put al-Baqir to ease that I never reject a hadith. I never would reject a hadith that I consider to be authentic. And they went through some very specific situations where Imam Abu Hanifa said, if I used my reasoning, I would say this. But instead, the Quran says this, the hadith says this. So I don't use my reasoning here. So al-Baqir became satisfied with that and he took him as a student. Okay, but that's the first incident, was actually confrontation. Like, you're the one that rejects the statements of my grandfather. Okay? There was a statement from Ahlul Hijaz, the people of Hijaz, mocking the people of Iraq. They said that for every 100 ahadith, they say that 99 are false and they only take one. But again, the idea was that, that they had to be very strict due to their climate about whether or not to accept a hadith. And many of the collections of ahadith, the majority of the collection of ahadith came after Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah's time anyway. So again, there's no questioning his knowledge and questioning how he used the ahadith in his madhab. He definitely used the sunnah, and that was the second one of his usul. Then you have qawl al-sahabi, the statement of a companion. That's number 3. Qawl al-sahabi. Now Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah said that I have the right to pick and choose between the sahaba. And now you see the influence of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. These were the 3 sahaba that settled in Kufa. So Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he preferred the opinion of the sahaba that came to Iraq. Some of the scholars, subhanAllah, and this is really brilliant, they say that not only for their ilm, but because he said they understood our context. Which shows you again that when they gave fatwa, they understood that they were giving fatwa for a particular context. They didn't expect people to just copy-paste fatwa and copy-paste fiqh for their things. So these were the Sahaba that settled in Kufa, settled in Iraq. And he said, as for the Sahaba, I have a right to pick and choose who I'm going to favor. Right? Because they differed amongst themselves. And Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu overwhelmingly is the most influential figure in the Hanafi madhab. All right? But he said, as for everyone after the Sahaba, hum rijal wa nahnu rijal. They are men and we are men. Now why is this significant? Remember the confrontation with the man with Abu Hanifa over saying Al-Hasan made a mistake? There was this idea, and obviously it wasn't propagated by Al-Hasan himself or Ibn Sirin or these great scholars. Just like it wasn't just like Abu Hanifa rahimahullah didn't propagate himself as the only opinion. Like, he knows his opinion is at the end of the day an opinion of man. It's not infallible. So Imam Abu Hanifa said, look, as for everyone else, hum rijal wa nahnu rijal. We will use our reasoning. They are men and we are men. We will use our reasoning to arrive at our opinions. We're not bound by the opinions of the tabi'een. We're not bound by the opinions of them. Then you have number 4, al-qiyas, using analogy. Okay, in your reasoning, using analogy. Qiyas means analogy. It's to take an incident, find the illah, find the reason for the revelation of a particular ayah or a hadith being said in regards to that, and then use that to apply it to other rulings that came up. Okay, so something happened with the Prophet ﷺ like this, take it and apply it to a different situation that's simple. So for example, the very classical example of qiyas, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu comparing the pregnant woman to a sick person, someone who's temporarily sick, when it comes to making up days of fasting. Okay, should she make up days of fasting or should she just pay fidya? Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says, well, she's like the one who's temporarily sick, where temporarily she's unable to fast, then she's able to fast, so she should make up the days. So this is the classical example of the use of qiyas. Then he has iftirad al-masail. Iftirad al-masail means hypothetical problems. And this is something, again, that he was criticized for and his students were criticized for. It helped a lot, but some people took it to an extreme. Okay? It helped a lot, but some people took it to an extreme. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, if you ask him a question, he says, did it happen? You say no, he said, then don't ask me. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, will list out all kinds of possibilities. And the Hanafi ashab, you know, the ashab, they'll list out all these different types of things, and then they'll say, did it happen? Did it not happen? That doesn't matter, that's irrelevant. How would you deal with it if it did happen? Okay? And there are over 60,000 cases that were referred to Imam Abu Hanifa and his ashab, and debating what would happen if this happened and so on and so forth. So they debated the hypotheticals, and that, you know, obviously that bothered some others, and some people took it way too far, you know, to a point that they started to exaggerate in certain things, and they started to discuss issues that weren't even important, and they started to then use loopholes and tricks and so on and so forth, and that's where it became an issue. So you had iftirad al-masail. Then you had sixth, which is istihsan. Istihsan means juristic preference. Okay? It means to prefer, this is number 6. Okay? Right? Number 6. All right, it means a preference. Now, what is that? This is something where Ash-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa differ. Now, over the next week, inshallah, you'll get a full picture and you'll understand where they were coming from. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that a faqih, a scholar, can give preference to one rule over the other because his heart feels that it might be correct. Meaning, you know, if the evidences seem to be sort of balanced and things of that sort, he can just go with the one that's even over his reasoning, and he can say, my heart feels comfortable with this one, and so on and so forth. And Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah rejected that entirely. So when Imam Shafi'i took the school of Abu Hanifa and the school of Malik, he rejected this concept entirely of just how you feel about it, you know, instead of going into reasoning and things of that sort. Then the last one is al-hiyal. Al-hiyal is again something that can be used for good or bad. The linguistic translation of hiyal is evasions. You know, evading certain, it's basically loopholes. Hiyal are loopholes. What that means is, if someone is in difficulty, in order to remove the things that are causing, you know, al-mada'iq, that are causing difficulty, you find loopholes for people to get out of certain situations that they're in. Now, obviously, there's room for that in the Sharia, right? We mentioned the situation of Abu Yusuf and Harun al-Rashid. There's room for that at times. But when it gets to a point where people are playing tricks to get out of paying zakah, right? Which some people started to do, right? They would give their money away at some point, and then they take it back at another point so that they'd escape the hawl of zakat, and they don't have to pay. When it gets to a point where it becomes devious in its nature, then it becomes like Bani Israel type stuff, right? So that's when it becomes really, really heavily criticized, and that's when it becomes a serious issue. Now, obviously, you know, every madhab has their famous opinions. Those are the usul of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, the famous opinions. And you will find, again, the context of ahadith should be taken into consideration when you're studying opinions, when you're looking at certain things that happen, as opposed to just automatically coming to the conclusion that the Imam rejected the hadith or the Imam did not know the hadith. Okay, so Imam al-Dihlawi, for example, he takes the opinion of delaying the Asr Salah. This is something that was narrated by, you know, multiple of the tabi'een. It was narrated by Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. And again, all of these things come from, at the end of the day, they can be traced back to the Sahaba. So delaying the Asr to later than the other madhahib, that's something that there's precedence for. Now, subhanAllah, interestingly enough, in the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, Abu Hanifa himself believed in delaying the Asr. Both Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf and Al-Shaybani believed what the other three madhahib believed. So that shows you in the Hanafi madhab there is room, right? There was room always for these scholars to debate and to come to their own conclusions and things of that sort. So they disagreed with Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah on that point. But again, it's not out of nowhere. You know, obviously the issue of not doing rafa' yadayn, as strong as the evidences would be, you know, for the other madhahib, there is an authentic hadith from Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala anhu that he didn't do rafa' yadayn. There is a correlation there between Ibn Mas'ud and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. You know, it's okay for these people to go and to prefer certain evidences to others when they all seem authentic and when the Sahaba choose to do different things, rather than to reject them as completely baseless. Right? Even Imam Bukhari, by the way, Imam Bukhari wrote, because the rafa' yadayn, believe it or not, it's not like it is now where people like break each other's arms in certain countries if they do rafa' yadayn and call them names and labels and stuff like that. But even then, rafa' yadayn became a very hot topic issue. Imam Bukhari wrote a book called Juz Rafa' Yadayn, where he documented 170 authentic ahadith that he said proved Rafa' Yadayn. And then they asked him, so are you saying that Imam Abu Hanifa is one of al-khurafat, like he just makes things up? He said, no, I'm not saying that. He said, A'udhu billah. Hasha, like, no, I'm not saying that at all. We have our evidences, they have their evidences. At the end of the day, these evidences are up for debate, right? How you understand particular hadith, how you contextualize them, how you understand time of revelation and things of that sort. So no matter how convinced I am in my view, that doesn't mean that I would accuse the other one of having a baseless view. And of course, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, خُذُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَخَذْنَا. This is narrated in the Hashiyah of Ibn Abidin. Take from where we took. He used to tell his students, take from where we took. So he encouraged his students to use his usul and to contribute to his madhab. The building of the Hanafi madhab, the constructing of the Hanafi madhab came through great scholars, not just him, but through great scholars. There are many terms that are used in the Hanafi madhab. There is a shaykhain or a sahibain, as we said, the two companions that would refer to Abu Yusuf and a Shaybani. When they say in their madhab, when they say as-salaf, the pious predecessors, because as-salaf, in the hadith literature means the first three generations. When they say as-salaf, they mean everyone before as-Shaybani. And al-khalaf is everyone after as-Shaybani. Those that came later is everyone after as-Shaybani. So you'll find sometimes these intricacies in the way that they say, and there are many, many different things that you can take. They even, subhanAllah, there's even language in some of the books of the Hanafi madhab, at-tarafain, the two parties. Why would they say at-tarafain? Because Ash-Shaybani, out of all the students of Abu Hanifa, used to disagree with him the most. Because he had the most exposure to Ahl al-Hadith. He went to study with Malik for 3 years and so on and so forth. He lived in that environment. So they would say the two parties, because they tended to disagree. Even though, again, Ash-Shaybani wrote the encyclopedia of Hanafi fiqh. All right? So they have these types of things. And obviously, Al-Imam Al-A'zam is Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, as we see it in the Hanafi madhab. When he passed away, by the way, I forgot to show you this, but this is the, Bismillah. Inshallah, I'll get it. There we go. This is Masjid Kufa, where Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah used to teach. I think that's 1915 or something like that. It's the early 1900s, a picture of Masjid Kufa. Did it again. This is his grave. If it opens, there. This is where the graveyard of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is. Where did Imam Abu Hanifa die? I said it in the very beginning of this class. Baghdad, because he was held in the high security prison of Baghdad. You understand, subhanAllah? And this is very, again, it's sad that that's what it came to, but he was taken to Baghdad by Abu Ja'far, and that's where he passed away, and that's where his grave is, in Baghdad actually. Okay, then finally, what I want to show you guys is the spread of the madhab, the legacy and the spread of the madhab. And no, they're not just Desis. There are other Hanafis too. But where did the madhab spread? Now, some of the reasons for the spread of the madhab, if you look at it. Number one, obviously, we say the sincerity of the imams. There's no doubt about it. Did Imam Abu Hanifa found a madhab called the Hanafi madhab? No, people came afterwards and they adopted his principles and so on and so forth. And it became an established school of thought, recognized in Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It became, ironically, after Abu Ja'far. Abu Ja'far was the one that killed Abu Hanifa. But the official madhab of the Abbasis became the Hanafi madhab. So they actually adopted the Hanafi madhab after Abu Ja'far passed away as well. And subhanAllah, Abu Ja'far, I don't know if I said this, but when Abu Hanifa, when they read his wasiyah out, he said, the man used to humiliate me when I was alive and he humiliates me when he's dead. Because his wasiyah that, don't put me in a place that's been taken by dhulm or something of that sort. So their political adoption of a madhab has a huge influence on any madhab. And we're going to talk about it, okay? Abu Yusuf, the reason why the Hanafi madhab was adopted by the Abbasis was because Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf became Qadi al-Quda for Harun al-Rashid, the later Abbasi Khalifa. He became the head judge, and Abu Yusuf appointed many Hanafi judges. And so the madhab, it started in Iraq, it spread through Iraq, and then it went into places. Obviously, most of the places, and there's just no doubt about it, the Hanafi madhab was the most friendly madhab to minorities. It was viewed that way. Friendly, not in the sense of rights and things of that sort, but just being pragmatic and practical and things of that sort. It spread along with many of the futuhat, many of the conquests in that sense. So Asia and China were dominated by the Hanafi madhab. The Hanafi madhab spread to them. There's some places like Andalus, for example, that the Hanafi madhab never touched. Okay, like that were hardcore Maliki places. North Africa was a Maliki place, which we're going to talk about. But the Hanafi madhab tended to spread through Khurasan, all of the Persian territories, all of the Asian territories, and things of that sort. And then when Ad-Dawla al-Fatimiyya in Egypt, the Fatimids are a Shi'i dynasty. And they're a very far out Shi'i dynasty, the Fatimiyya. They wanted to kill the Hanafi madhab. So they took over after the Abbasis and they tried to kill it all, they tried to eradicate it. And so Egypt, the Hanafi madhab was eliminated from there. And when Salah ad-Din rahimahullah came to Egypt and he corrected them, Salah ad-Din belonged to what madhab? Salah ad-Din was a Shafi'i. So the Shafi'i madhab became the madhab in Egypt at that time, after Salah ad-Din rahimahullah ta'ala. But then Egypt eventually became a place which really, even till today, subhanAllah, you can find the Maliki madhab and the Shafi'i madhab are very strong there. You find great Hanafi scholars in Egypt as well, until today. Until today, by the way, in the Haramain, this is just a tradition that's never died. In both of the Harams, all four of the madhabs are taught. There is a scholar from all four schools that teaches in Masjid al-Haram in Mecca and in Masjid al-Nabawi. Right? You can still find it until today. And that's part of the legacy of these madhabs. And again, Ad-Dawla al-Uthmaniyya, the Ottoman Empire as well, adopted the Hanafi madhab. And one of the reasons why the Hanafi madhab is so large today is because the last khilafah that left off was a Hanafi khilafah, right? So it tended, if there was a Shafi'i khilafah, and unfortunately things got very dirty and nasty between the Shafi'is and the Hanafis throughout history, right? To a point that in the eras of ta'assub, in the eras of hardcore blind following, fanatical following, when a Shafi'i became Khalifa, he would fire all the Hanafi judges, and when a Hanafi became Khalifa, he would fire all the Shafi'i judges. They would even give fatwas against each other. They would, there are some Hanafi scholars in the 13th century that said a Shia is better than a Shafi'i. There is a Shafi'i scholar that responded to him and said a Jew is better than a Hanafi, right? They took shots at each other. It became very, very, very nasty. There is times where we're in Masjid al-Haram, this is just up until 250, 300 years ago, 4 different salahs. There were 4 adhans, 4 iqamas, 4 salahs. Each madhab had its side of the Kaaba. So this is obviously a degree of fanaticism that's completely rejected and that none of these imams intended. Obviously they all intended to give us access to the Prophet ﷺ, and from the different companions of Rasulullah ﷺ, the influences of the companions flew into them or flowed through them. But this is where it's left off. So the Hanafi madhab obviously dominates especially this area over here, Turkey even, and Asham as well, because again the effect of the Khilafah, Iraq, and all the way on that side. Then if you look on the other side, it's almost like a line. Do you see that? Once you get to this side of the Muslim world, it's almost all not Hanafi. You see, so political spread had a lot to do with which madhab the Khalifa adopted, and what happened as a result of that. Just a few quick things. These are notes especially for the Arabic students. What are some books to read in the Hanafi madhab? What are some ways to acquaint yourself? There's a book called Al-Fiqh Al-Islami by Sheikh Akram Nadwi. It's a new book that's written by Sheikh Akram Nadwi, Al-Fiqh Al-Islami. And he talks about the development of the Hanafi school and things of that sort. And he goes through at least the rulings on Tahara and so on and so forth. The most famous book in the Hanafi madhab now, present day, is Mukhtasar al-Quduri. Meaning throughout the Muslim world, you almost always find that any Hanafi school is teaching Mukhtasar al-Quduri. Mukhtasar al-Quduri it addresses 12,500 issues in fiqh from a Hanafi perspective. So it has, what's that? 12,500. So it kind of spans like the entire spectrum, from the ibadat to the mu'amalat, the acts of worship and so on and so forth. I think there's an app for al-Quduri now, but it codifies the Hanafi madhab in a very simple way. And Imam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, in his book Raf' al-Malam, he called Imam al-Quduri, whose name was, it's a very long name, okay, but his name was Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Ja'far ibn Hamdan. Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Ja'far ibn Hamdan. He was a scholar from Baghdad, about 200 years after Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah calls him Imam al-Hanafiyyah. So he is the Imam of the Hanafis. And the beauty of Mukhtasar al-Quduri, in the way that it explains the Hanafi madhab, by the way, is that Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, his name is mentioned 200 times, Abu Yusuf's name is mentioned 150 times, and Ash-Shaybani's name is mentioned 150 times, which shows you again the way that these, that the Hanafi school would develop. And then on a more serious level, there's a book called Nur al-Idah, which is the light of clarification, by Hassan ibn Ammar Shurumbulani. And this is a manual of Hanafi law that pretty much any student that studied, again, Hanafi fiqh at a more serious level and anywhere in the world, they studied Nur al-Idah. Okay? There are some other books, some more historical books that I won't go through now, just because I have a lot of them in front of me, and I know that we're way over time. We're already 30 minutes over time today. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll go ahead and we'll stop, and I'll take questions from you guys. I hope you guys benefited from it. You learned everything that you need to learn about the Hanafi madhab. Congratulations. You're all Hanafis today, and I'll make you Malikis tomorrow. The beauty of this, by the way, is that when you study any of these Imams, even when you study Sufyan al-Thawri or al-Awza'i and things of that sort, or al-Tabari or al-Bukhari, you're like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that madhab, right? So hopefully I'll succeed and I'll make you all Hanbalis at the last day and it'll all be good, inshallah. That's the plan, right? It's just the master plan, right? To convert all of you. Questions? Yes?